Hi, everybody. Mary Long here. And here we are for Don Yang's critique. All right, Don, it's all yours. And you're, yeah.
Yes. Okay, so before we begin, well, thank you for participating to listen to me. So I appreciate it. As far as choosing the paintings are concerned, I went to the site PAPC Virtual Critic, and I downloaded all the images that was indicated as a demo. I'm sorry, the critique piece there. I wasn't sure whether I was supposed to download any other images or not, so I hope I didn't miss out any painting they intended to be part of this critique. I don't think so, because I counted 21 and Mary counted 21 too. So, and also I'm gonna do according to the list, the order of uploading. Whoever uploaded the first, that person's painting is the top, and whoever uploaded the last is gonna last. That way, people don't feel like why they are later and so on. So, and then also as time-wise, again, I just wanted to make sure that everybody's included. So I went back to, I think the August 29th. So I think I covered every painting that is between there, because I didn't know that until Mary told me that any other paintings other than from our painting event, paint out, they are included as well. So I went all the way back to August 29th. And then I included every painting that I saw that there. Now, I just wanted to tell you that same thing I said in critique in, say, still life painting and so on. I like the critique that I do with the younger students in the classroom, where I saw exactly what they are looking at. I was actually painting alongside with them. But in this case, I am not looking at what you saw. So there may be some discrepancies as to what I feel like it should be included and whatnot versus what you saw. And then, of course, the screen images, it does not reflect the color temperature and color intensity. So there is some discrepancies, but not, and I hope that you bear with me on that one. Okay, so I'm gonna start off with, I'm gonna share it from my album. This is Anne's painting. Okay, so I wrote down all this, the writings are actually their own writing. I just copied and pasted the description of the painting and so on. So this is a painting. Looks like, and it's relatively monochromatic other than some greens there. So what I saw, I'm reading off my phone, my note here. And the way I see it is I really like the soft smoothness and very subtle, almost like moody appearance to it. A few things that I would have done differently, if I would do differently if I painted this. One would be, since you added some sense of color of the green for trees and so on, if that's the case, obviously that the building structure being right in the center, I'm assuming that's your focal point. If that's the case, I would add some tint of color of bricks and so on, maybe on top of the roof and so on. You already have a very nice soft edge on the top. I'm sorry, the hard edge on the top of the roof. So I would indicate some that on the top of the roof, harden the make the edge sharper, and then give some sense of color, because this is the image that she saw there. So when I was looking at this photograph, I was thinking, since you introduced some color of the green, instead of leaving the green all alone and isolated, I would add some sense of color of the brick on the building. And also, clearly, the building seems to be a focal point. In that case, unlike the trees, more natural object, that I would emphasize some firm and hard edges, especially in the front portion that I circled with the blue there. Again, too, so that it will have much more stronger sense of focal point and really jumps out of there. I really like the driveway that leads the viewer's eye to the focal point. Only thing here is it seems to be almost like it's going kind of a side off of your focal point. In that case, when I saw this painting here, I'm looking at the chairs and so on. I would definitely take advantage of it and place in where you see the red rectangle, as a kind of stopping point. That way, this curvature line doesn't lead the viewer's eye out of your picture plane, but it kind of cements right then that point, and then make the eye linger around your main focal point. That's what I like to do. But I really like the device of the curvature driveway leading right in front of it. And the only thing is I would like to have it stop there instead of leading out. And so what I wrote down here is a very dynamic use of curve towards the focal point, and there's some sense of a structure for the building that'll give nice contrast against the organic material of object of the tree. That's what I felt might improve a little bit there. Okay. Should I just move on to next one and next one, Mary?
Yes.
Okay. Then next person is Yelena's. Okay. Now I really like the colorful, all the color harmony, and also very thick impasto, very textural appearance to it. So this is the case that the way I see it is, instead of following more value patterns and larger valueness and so on, seems to be she intentionally, instead of doing that, went along with more color senses and more textural feeling of it. So this is the case. I took a look at this in a black and white image, and that in that case, black and white image, in value-wise, it doesn't translate very well. But then that's I guess the intention of her to do that. So I'm assuming she made a conscious choice to be stylized in that way there. So it's not so much of a conventional value-oriented painting, but more color, impasto, and texture, and so on. A few things here. I'm looking at the top of the water. I would either overlap in front of the tree branch or bring it down. That way it doesn't create unnecessary tension by tangent there. Second thing here is I would give a little more the sprayed appearance by running your dry brush left and right there. That way water doesn't look too linear, a line appearance to it. Even as the water is coming down, between where it's coming, beginning to fall down to coming down to the ground with the wind and so on, you would expect that there is going to be a little more the spray or swing left and right there. All it takes is probably some the clean dry brush to give a slight tap to the left and right and so on. That'll give a little more naturalistic appearance to it. As far as the color, the tree is concerned, just watch out for such a symmetrical branching out of the tree, same way. So try to, even if some trees may turn out to be looking that way, see if you can give a little more variety where one side has additional branches and so on. That's something that I look for. I always look for what I actually am looking at, and then how, if there is anything that might look strange and so on there. Rather than that, I really like the colorfulness of it, but thickness of it, texture of it, that I really like looking at this here. Okay.
Thank you.
And next one is Karen's painting. It's done in acrylic, 5x7. Okay, done linen. Okay. A few things I noticed that here was I really like a lot of soft edge appearance to it, very subtle edge separation instead of too hard in many places. But at the same time, on the other hand, perhaps you can add some strategic hard edges. I was pointing out at the tree, and also a couple of the poles in the foreground. That way the edges of the poles are not too similar from the front to the back there. That's why I noticed there. And good sense of a linear perspective that is helped by the distance between the poles. Okay, then the background, I circled the long circle there. I like the fact that she went along with the more bluish color to push the sense of a depth, but at the same time, maybe slightly de-intensified blue, slightly gray down blue that will push the sense of a deep depth further into that. Okay, And on the other hand, I really like the intensity of the tree where it made a larger circle in the front of the red. That no doubt compared to any other green you look at there, that really stands out. So combined with that, the track or trail leading to that. And this is again where the tree actually stops the track right there, so that the eye stops right there. And then as it goes up, you got such an intense, warm, yellowish, the green. There's no doubt nobody's gonna mistake, where the eye is gonna go or where the main focal point is gonna be there. So very simple. It seems to be a very simple device, but very effective and very convincing. The way of creating focal point there. Okay, and I also like a little bit of the yellow showing underneath of the green. That way, it's not just totally green, but almost like a sense of either earth or warmth that is generated from the earth that receives the sun from above. So I find that's one of the main differences when I paint outdoors. The light bouncing off amongst each other, and also the warmth, the temperature coming up off of the ground, that minimize such harsh darks that often you see in studio paintings there. So I think she did a really good job of creating not just the green, but more the color temperature. And to me, the Plein painting has so much to do with the air, the temperature, with the cool, warm, and so on. So I think she really effectively used that very nicely. So I really like those little spots of yellows and so on there. Okay, and this is Liz, 8th Street Fountain. Oh, okay, it's all right. I don't see the title. So it says 8th Street Fountain Grand Park oil on canvas board 9x12. It's a very tough topic. I painted the fountain many times. You have the architectural accuracy. Not that we're gonna make it the architectural drawing, but still convincing sense of architecture. And also you got the flowing water, water dropping, and also with the wind and so on, it sprays around. So it's quite tough topic. And also all the background in the middle of the city with the trees and buildings and so on. So it's got a lot going on that it can really make it very challenging there. Most of all, I really like the sense of light on the top of and the bottom as well of the fountain. It really gives a good, I'm assuming it must be a very sunny day, because that's how I feel, that the light on the fountain, and also all the very warm yellow green behind. And because also she put down much cooler temperature in the front, that the structure in the front, that really sets out that the fountain, or main focal point, really stand out with not only just the central position, but also the temperature wise, really nicely set out there. Few things I made note here is the, show you here. So that the dark behind, that seems to be a little too overly dark. You don't want to break down the value too much in the larger shades, but in this case, perhaps you can just give us some sense of a light side of the tree, and then the dark side of the tree, while making dark not so severely dark. Again, that's something that in outdoor painting, because there's so many lights, who knows where they come from. It could be coming from another structure that is not within your picture, your frame of the painting, or could be something passing by and so on. So just have to be a little careful about pushing the dark. Now, small thin darks, like you see little crevices of dark and so on, that's absolutely necessary. But once dark's getting large and it's extremely dark, that kind of flattens things out there, and then kind of can kill the sense of an airy feeling to it. So I would be careful about that. Even those trees, the tree trunks and so on, just watch out for extreme dark. This is where you can utilize your value scale. You can literally put it next to your painting, and then see if you are hitting too many of those dark, extreme darks in too large areas. Then you kind of ask yourself, maybe I'm overloading it with it. the check marks I have there, I'm not sure what they are, very light white value there, but in a way, I don't need to know what they are because it's more background. But only thing here is when that is combined right next to dark trees, that really brings attention there too much. Luckily, you got nicely centrally positioned, very warm fountain there. So I don't think the eye is gonna move on to that area, but still it is a slowly, in a way, kind of competing against your main focal point because of such a strong contrast between dark tree trunks and that the light values that you indicated there. Again, whatever that it is, it's not really important. Just I would just grade things down and then bring that bring the contrast a little closer than such a light value against the dark tree there. Also, what I wrote down here is the background buildings. I'm sure when you are looking at that building, that they really look quite, if they are made out of red bricks, quite intense. But if I were to do it, I would use my artistic license and make it a little grayer. That way that the red doesn't have too much competition against the red on the fountain. That's how I would treat it there. The foreground, I didn't mark it here, right along her signature, the sign there. I'm assuming that's the glass, the grass blades coming out. If that's the case, I would make a little more irregular as opposed to flat appearance to it. Again, in that case, if you have enough paint there, then all it takes is just give a little flick here and there with a dry brush. That way, just to avoid such a flatness to it. That way, it have much natural appearance to it, as opposed to if you make it too flat, it can look like a carpet, artificial carpet appearance to it. And let me see. Oh, about the water. Yeah, as I said in the beginning, it's quite challenging. But the one thing I would do is I would kind of avoid making it look like too much of a consistent beading appearance to it. So give more irregular shape. Maybe some places a little longer, some are a little shorter. Maybe some the veer off to the side and left. That should give a little more naturalistic appearance of the flow of the water. As you all agree, the water is such a difficult topic. Stagnant water, flowing water, gushing water, big body of water. So much to learn from, the challenging. So it's a quite challenging topic. The fountain is going up, and also water is coming down, and then water down below that's gently flowing. So it's a good place to do water study there. Let me see what else I wrote down. Okay. I mentioned about really like the warm sense of the light there. The fountain structure, yeah, that's the corner, lower left corner. I put down the arrow there. Some of the edges you may want to soften it. That way it doesn't look too flat appearance to it, especially where I put down the red arrow. Because it's combined with such a deep dark underneath of it, that unnecessarily leads the eye too much, because strong contrast always has a tendency to bring out attention to it. But overall, again, you handle the topic quite well, especially that focal point, the fountain itself, the sense of a warm temperature. I think that you did very well. It's just some supporting characters of those background trees and those edges, the grass in the front, those supporting characters can be modified a little bit. I think it would look even better. Okay.
Okay, thanks very much.
Sure. And next one is Kirsten, Clock Tower, 11 by 14, 8 a.m. So now I noticed that this and some others also, I think, Howard did and Simon did, that the clock tower itself. And as I said when I was doing demo, actually that's what originally I thought I was going to do demo, but then I thought it may be a little too challenging in terms of so many details and distracting there. That's why I chose the new site there. So to begin with, the architectural structure itself requires a good deal of practice and experience of the drawing aspect of it, not so much of the painting. So it's a quite challenging topic that she didn't shy away from it. And I really like the light on the top. Yeah, the bracket here. It shows really strong, warm sense of it. And the people and the bottom, such a cool, the shadow, cool and gray. So really contrasting warmth on the top, and then down below, maybe some structures casting the shadow, whatnot. So it has a really nice contrast. And also the top tower surrounded by blue sky that really make that structure really stand out very strongly there. Few things here. The knife work on the building, I guess this ivy. Looking at the scale of the building, in that case, you may want to break down into smaller knife work. That way it doesn't look like giant leaves covering the building. All it takes is just go back and then break down into a smaller stroke appearance to it. Not necessarily breaking down the values or colors, but just smaller appearance to it, suggestive appearance to it. That way it doesn't end up looking like more big, large, the leaves, the out of scale appearance to it. Now, figures are always, of course, difficult, especially when you want it to just give a suggestive appearance to it. Sometimes that's more difficult than, say, model posing right in front of you, where you've got all the information and all you have to do is, try to draw and paint exactly. Here, you don't want to do that, so that's quite a tough challenge that you gave yourself as well. Because also you have to talk about, be careful about the proportions and so on. The bottom sticks, I ran those lines in that direction in order to give more sense of those greens are flat round. Otherwise, it can easily look like, I'm showing here, it become a little ambiguous as to is it more up plane or the inclined plane and so on. So again, all it takes is you can run the brushes in that direction that I indicated, especially because looking at your building, I can generally guess where your station point is. So by running brushes that direction, now that also gives a good sense of perspective without actually running, the very rigid perspective lines and so on. So just as the appearance of the brush stroke, so the color directions can suggest a nice sense of perspective without spelling out everything. So that would be something that I would suggest there. Okay. Next one is Dorothy. Okay, clock tower again. Now, Dorothy, did you use the medium for this painting? Certain medium?
I used a little bit of medium, but not much.
Okay, maybe because of the picture, the reflection, because it seems to be quite oil concentrated there. So I wasn't sure whether that's the case or not. Now the structure looks quite solid.
The board that I used had a previous painting on it, and then it was painted over.
Ah, okay.
So I think that's the texture you're seeing is because of a previous painting that was on it.
I see. Okay, so that might be the case there. Some of the perspective lines can be a little tighter, like this, the top of the upper left building. The angle might be a little too severe. It's something that quickly maybe adjusted there and so on. But other than that, I really like the geometric shapes of different shapes of the different buildings in this particular angle to it. And it seems to be solidly placed on the top of the ground. So it has a good sense of the stationed appearance to it. Also, the building is kind of placed a little higher part of the canvas there. So it gives a sense of kind of upward angle to it. So without actually spelling out that incline the plane, it gives just enough the sense of that. Again, as I said during the demo, that's my personal preference. I like to indicate the ups and downs and turning and of the grounds and so on. Something that I like to do it perhaps because of that, I like the position and placement of the building you laid out there. Now let's look at it. Okay, here it is. I wrote down A, B, C, D to see, because when I look at it, sky color seems to be all across the board from A, C to B. These seems to be all same. So I was wondering, you know, what you were seeing. So things like this is that because I wasn't able to see while you are painting, I cannot say for sure. But like I did in my demo, when I was looking at that building, I noticed that left side corner, lower corner, because light was coming from not only east but also south. That side is a little different blue than right upper corner. So I was just wondering whether you faced a similar situation where the blueness between among A, B, C, and D might have had slight difference as opposed to more uniform blue. Again, that's something that I wasn't able to see that. Just I was just thinking about that. The horizontal lines there versus vertical line. What I was thinking about there was I was looking at those greens among those horizontal trees and the horizontal, the grass and the vertical tree. They seem to be a little too similar, considering that they are receiving the light at different angle between horizontal, the ground, and the vertical trees. Perhaps there is a little value change that should be indicated. That way it'll give a better sense of a direction of the light, such as you gave that the shadow that already gives the viewers okay where the light is coming from. So by giving a different value, different intensity, different temperature amongst those verticals and horizontals, that'll jive with the direction of the shadow that you indicated there. Again, that's something that of course, I wasn't able to see while you're painting, but I'm just guessing there might have been a little different value, temperature, and so on that you might have observed there. Also, you painted relatively quite thin, which is fine, but perhaps maybe you can, some areas, especially the focal point, you can give varying degree of thickness where you can paint some area a little thicker. That's one of the many devices you can create the strong focal point with a heavier texture, more thickness, and so on. That's something that you may want to consider if you like to create much more stronger and isolated focal point there. Let's see what else I wrote down there. The sky, building. Okay, yeah. So those are things, but again, one thing really that got my attention is all the geometry of different triangles and the different shapes of that. I really like that aspect of it, combined with all that natural, the objects of the trees and grass and so on. Okay.
Okay.
So next painting is Julius Painting. It's a watercolor 8x10 and forest preserve. Okay. It's got very soft quality. I see very gentle quality. I don't know what kind of a day it was, maybe overcast day, I'm not sure, but looking at the sky. So what I noticed a few things here is I really like the softness. There's a few things that I kind of got my attention is those three clumps of tree, they seem to be a little too identical. Maybe indeed they were identical, but perhaps you can give a little varying appearance to it. Perhaps you can raise one a little higher, maybe different angles and so on there. I like much more individual textural appearance in the front, and also very warm golden appearance in the front versus much gray in the background and much soft appearance that really pushes the sense of distance between foreground and foreground. So that the background with those trees, they really plays a nice role of nicely receding that really helps the viewers really take hold of the front area, your main focal point there. And that happens because of all that nice atmospheric perspective created there. I also like the subtle variation of the color within the water. The front, it's got a little more purplish, warm blue. As it goes back, it's more blue, blue, and appearance, cooler blue appearance of toy. So even within the body of water, that pushes a sense of not only variation, also a sense of a distance as well. Now, one thing I might have done different, I might do differently would be this tree that being such a foreground. I'm assuming that's your main focal point. Maybe that can be described just a little bit, not necessarily a lot of detail, but a little more sense of a structure, maybe, and so on. It can stand out so that it can stand out a little stronger. That's something that I was looking at there. But overall, it's got nice, very soft quality to it, good sense of depth to it, and good sense of the atmosphere there. So that I really liked it. And Shannon's painting, and she wrote down on the Facebook that site about some difficulties she faced there. So I read it, and then I was thinking what can be done here. By the way, what's the size of this painting? It's not written here. Also, my question was,
I don't think Shannon's here tonight.
oh, she's not. Okay. Okay, then I just go. What I noticed that I wasn't sure which one is the focal point. Is it the cross, or it's the building? It could be a building, knowing it is surrounded by dark values surrounding it, and there's such an intense color with the light value. Or it could be cross, being such a front central position there, and such a dark, very obvious sign. Also, the symbolism plays a lot of role in terms of grasping viewers' attention. Anything that we can recognize as a symbol that tend to play the good focal point, role of the focal point there. So that was something that I was wished to ask her. If it was a cross that she was trying to create as a focal point, then I would have described it more, maybe some hard edges and so on, so that it can stand out even more so, maybe even some details. If it was the building that was the intended focal point, then I would form up some edges, whether it be top of the roof or side of the building and so on. To me, it seems to be that looks more like focal point, whether she intended or not, seeing that yellow, red, and blue and so on, such a intense colors there. Okay, so edges there. The tree, the upper right corner, and that the small trees in the front, they seem to be a little too similar. I'm assuming they are receiving the lights at different angle, and the also distance is different. The upper right corner looks like that's more forward toward us, and that is far distance. In that case, I would give different temperature or different value contrast. More than likely that the smaller trees in the back would receive less of the contrast, less of a temperature and so on, to give a sense of a distance and depth to it. Okay. So what she said when I was reading it, she, in her attempt, she grouped the values in simplified arrangement, and you can still do that, but you can still, while maintaining the values in very tight, simplified, larger groups, but you can inject different temperatures within it. That way, as a value, it still holds the large, the composition that you wished for. But as far as color sense are concerned, it's not going to be all the same. That's something that I like to do while I'm holding on to the value, because that's the glue that keeps the composition together. But instead of having same color, the same greens and so on, maybe some areas are a little cooler or warmer. Later on, I think last painting, Robin's painting, I was looking at, and she did a really good work of inserting some subtle colors on non-local colors while matching the values. So that is a good example that I'm going to talk about later on. So that, and next one is Linda's painting. Yeah, the Gilson Beach, I'm familiar with it. I went there to paint a number of times. I really like that area too. kind of like earlier who's painting, like Julius Painting, very soft, very gentle quality to it, very almost like the pastel like quality to it. So very soft, almost like the soft breeze kind of a wind quality to it. So I really like it. Some compositional devices I noticed that is that the grass nicely leads to the tree, especially the tree with the light value there. And then also she indicated very hard edges there. So clearly that really stands out against the much cooler the blue color of the lake. So that really stands out, but it starts with this direction by clump of the grass underneath of that there. So really nice to see the movement leading to the main focal point there. That is what I wrote down here. Now, again, I really like the hard edge on the side of the tree, but perhaps because on one hand, I really like the softness to it, but I was thinking maybe there may be some secondary, not necessarily hard, but some firm edges, some other places. More than likely, that means the tree, because you don't want to create too hard edges on the blades of grass and so on. So that I guess the sidekick or supporting character of the other tree, maybe we can insert one or two places, some firm edges, not to outdo this hard edge in the red circle, but something that can complement or support there. And I circled with the blue at the bottom of the tree. And that's the thing that I really look for when I paint outdoors. Again, from Earth that has received the sun, that gives some sense of warm temperature. So between at the bottom of the tree and the top of the tree, I'll compare up and down and back and forth. Not so much of the value difference, but if I look for any opportunity to sneak in some warm temperature underneath while maintaining the value, that way, same value, that way it doesn't break up the value, but gives some radiating heat from surrounding objects, such as even the tree next to it, obviously that is receiving very strong light. So that light has to bounce back somewhere. So that's something that I often think about, how I can make those objects not uniformly one value or one temperature, but still give some sense of luminous appearance to it. I like the corner at the upper left corner with the blue triangle I indicated. That, as small as it is, that combined with a small upside down triangular shape between the trees that carries the background nicely at the beach further into that. If you didn't have that, it can easily look like the beach kind of gets stopped by the tree, but carrying just a little bit of that gives a continuity of the background that is being overlapped by those trees there. So that is nice. I also like this, the shapes I created with the red, the kind of bluish, purplish shadow. She pushed the temperature further of blue and purple. Because of that, she didn't really make the light, the speckled light in between very yellow, but nonetheless, because of the support of a nice purple and blue, that make those lights look quite warm without necessarily putting a lot of yellow into it. So that's a very smart way of making warm area warm by curving around and making the shadow, maybe even perhaps a more exaggerated cooler appearance to it. So it doesn't have to be loaded with a very intense, heavy yellow, but you can make it look warm without actually making it warm there. So I think that's a very smart the way of working with the color temperatures there. What did I write down here? Yeah, and then the top, the beach area, that against the blue above the lake, that gives nice contrast. So combined with the hard edge of the tree, the contrast of the blue against the yellow or orange on the beach, and the lighter value and that the supporting tree that really settles the focal point right there. Okay, and then naturalistic appearance of those grass blades, again, that worked out very nicely. And I'm looking at it, and I think that she also intentionally left some underlying undertone, looks like more orange tone she had underneath. So that kind of filters through, that gives a little more warm sense to it. So that I think worked out very nicely there. This is a Sue's painting in France. I don't know what region it is, but it looks like a very warm place there, having such an intense yellow and light valley right in the center. So the other peripheries, they just plays a nice role of framing that area. So clearly, my eye goes right into that, and also having people around. Anytime you put people or animals, they tend to bring the attention to it. So that worked out very nicely there. And also because of such a blue sky, that certainly they make that area really pop out there. What I wrote down here is, okay. Oh, I really like the reflection on that pond. Very suggestive appearance to it without necessarily describing every tree and so on. She might easily have been able to see those things, but gives very loose appearance to it, just enough to suggest that, well, that's the water which reflects the object that is facing it. So that worked out very nicely. One thing I noticed that here is that the red, the rectangle is the focal point I was indicating here. Those blue circles at the base of the tree, I'm assuming those trees are behind that pond, which if that's the case, I would make sure that the top edge of that the bank or the surrounding the area of the pond completely cut off very precisely, not precisely, but very decisively. That way you avoid the appearance where the tree is actually sprouting out from the structure, but rather it should show the sense that it is completely overlapped by that horizontal, the structure of the pond, especially that the left corner tree that gives a little the ambiguous appearance to it. The trees are, of course, something that the study of its own, that requires a lot of studies and so on. We don't need to describe very detailed, but general sense of that. For that, I wasn't quite sure about that the right corner, what indicated with the blue pen there. I'm assuming that's the part of the tree, but that's something that I wasn't quite. It wasn't quite clear to me. Okay. Again, we don't need to describe every all the trees exactly, but at least I like to avoid confusing or ambiguous appearance to it. I think that's as far as I like to carry the tree, unless the tree itself is a very important element. Then different story. I need to be more accurate of the tree, but otherwise, just enough to avoid confusion. That's how I carry my trees there. So that was the Sue's, and this is a Morris's painting. Yeah, this has almost like very pastel, like really color jumping out. So kind of similar to the feeling I received from Yelena's painting. It's not so much about the value structure that she was focusing on, but she was focusing very brilliant, intense color play, as opposed to more. I mean, it's a value of the light value, dark value, and so on, but the colors are the main story, sort of like Yelena. In case of Yelena's painting, she also added a texture that also the stylistic appearance to it. But in this case, so much of the color that's really dominating there. So what I wrote down here is so I wrote the color scheme is a very uplifting color. As we remember, it was very sunny, very nice day. So it really carries the mood and feeling that we had that day. Such a nice, warm, sunny autumn day. So it really carries the mood and the feeling we had that day. Okay, let's see. And then also the convincing sense of an atmosphere, like the structure in the far building, that the squarish, the red circle, red mark I laid down there, versus more, a little more defined appearance of the clock tower and so on. So that pushes nice distance to it. And also I like that the cloud, of course, the clouds they come and go, but that kind of that balances against the opposite side. So here I was wondering what it might have looked if there was no cloud and it's perfectly blue. I don't think that would have been too bad, but still I like the cloud kind of the having its presence there. Sometimes I think it was Linda's painting. Sometimes what I do is I may put a sailboat, even if it was not there when I was painting, but if I saw it ahead of time or later on, I may indicate that. Sometimes I put a couple of seagulls and so on as a balancing device. So I pretty much making things up for the sake of balance and sometimes more interest there. It's not something that I devise, but a lot of painters, the artists, they do that. So yeah, it worked out very nicely. The biggest thing I received is that because I was there, I remember how nice and warm, sunny days. So it carries that mood very nicely. And the scene itself is not the easiest scene. It's got a lot of elements to it. The people in action, and far distance buildings and so on. But she pushed the depth quite well, very deep depth into it. Now, Jill's painting here. I noticed that Mary, Jill, and Robin, and some others painted this gate. I've been meaning to paint that before, but now I'm gonna really have to go back out and paint there. Some really good works there. It says behind the clock tower, and I don't know the size of it. Now strong value contrast between the shadow on the grass and against the wall itself. So it really frames nicely that the focal point right there, and also the warmth of the light. Looked like she indicated added mixed in some good deal of yellow into that, and also that yellow looks quite warm because again, just like what I mentioned in the Linda's painting, cool shadow. Not only it's shadow, she didn't push the value really dark, but just temperature wise, such a cool, dull, the violet or purple shadow, because that's sitting right next to that the warm yellow. It makes the wall look even warmer. Again, we know that it was quite warm, sunny days, so I think that carried very nicely between the play between warm light and cool purple shadow there. See, what I also write down here is a few other things. Here is the value in the far corner of the wall, the kind of middle part on the left side of the wall. I would have softened it a little bit. Perhaps it was indeed quite dark, but the having such a dark right behind lighter value in the far wall, that kind of brings that little closer in distance when we know that that is going away plane there. So again, that's the area that either you can bring down, make the value a little lighter, and so you can still create a sense of a shadow by pushing the temperature. Not so much about pushing the value, but by pushing the temperature with a cool gray, cool and cooler purplish, the bluish temperature. You can still create a sense of the receding wall going away from your station point there, and the foliage right above worked nicely. That the very subdued, light valued green that works very nicely to indicate far the distance towards Montrose Harbor. I'm thinking there, so that worked out very nicely there. Also, one thing I noticed that the shadow, show here, shadow between the foreground and the background, those two, the blues I connected there, they seem to be a little too similar, considering that the left corner, the smaller patch of a shadow is far away, and the shadow in the front is towards us. So again, I would make the far shadow, the corner, the edge of the left edge of it. You can make it a little lighter, but grayer. That way, that'll work nicely with the receding the trail that goes away from you there. I wasn't sure about the little clump of the branches, whatnot, above the far wall. Maybe there was a little small tree there. If that was it was something like that was there, then I would kind of think about whether should I include it or should I just get rid of it. It's something that the decision that you'd like to make. Another thing that I like to point out, I didn't mark it here, is something that I will point out also later on. Another person, I think it's Mary's painting, and of this the wall as well, is that horizontal beam on the top. On the lower side, maybe you can insert some, again, same value, but slightly warmer temperature color to indicate bouncing lights. I'm sure there's light bouncing between those walls and ground and so on to break up such a one straight dark value that will hopefully give some sense of a warmth that the other walls are showing. So that'll work very nicely there. But I really like the turning of the trail, going to the left, but then make a right turn there. That will lead to your main, the center of interest there. So worked out very nicely there. Okay. Right. Next one is Howard. He painted in oil 8x8. The squares a little tough to compose because if you got a rectangular shape, you can always turn around and you're gonna have a different dimension and so on. But square, no matter how many times you turn, it's gonna be always square there. So it can be a little challenging. For that, I think he did a good job of placing those the horizontals and verticals and so on within it. It worked out very nicely there. And yeah, I noticed that a lot of it, so many shades of green. So greens are really tough to come up with. So doing the color chart really exposes our eyes to different varying greens there. Now, even though the Howard put down some deep darks and lights and so on, but this one to me belongs to more color-oriented painting, like earlier Yelena's painting or Marcy's painting, very strong, intense colors. So even though some darker colors and lighter colors, but nonetheless, even the darker colors are very the colorful. The color jumps out more than values there. Even you can see the wall itself is very purplish. So he certainly not only pushed the values, but also pushed the temperature of the color to indicate the shadow there. What I wrote down here is, so shapes are very simplified. So it comes down to just horizontal and to the verticals to it. So very simple, but very effective without scattering out too many places there. The edge qualities at the periphery of the trees are very nice. By doing so, it gives a good sense of an atmosphere, but also more naturalistic appearance to it, as opposed to, you know, those artificial the trees and so on. So that works very nicely to give natural appearance to it. As far as I talked about the color earlier, but color scheme wise, this belongs very cool color oriented. Got purple, blues and greens and so on. So I don't know, considering that they quite warm days, maybe you can indicate some warm ground or warm wall area and so on, unless you intentionally make everything very within that color scheme of the blues and purples and so on. So I wrote down here, was there any warm temperature or browns and oranges and yellows that you saw there? Since you got so much of blues and greens and purples there, if you insert strategically a few places that'll really jump out, so you don't have to do a lot, but perhaps maybe you can add some of those things considering the type of day we had that day. So that's one thing I noticed that there. Okay. And also this long rectangle, the diagonal rectangle I point out is, I wasn't quite sure as far as how it reads. At first I thought maybe it almost can look like, I can see what he saw was front tree overlapping the tree behind, but it can have a kind of a cutout appearance to it, as if that the darker tree has a tree service done, mainly because it's such a strong diagonal the line. So if you make the front tree leaf more come in and out, more irregular appearance to it, then that gives a more natural appearance of a one tree, the light tree, overlapping and partially covering edge of the dark tree behind, as opposed to dark trees cut off quite abruptly. So that's something I noticed that there. And Mary's painting, yeah. Mary, you wrote down the September 25th, but this is a painting you did that day, right?
Yes.
Okay, so so that was not the 25th. Yeah, I saw this painting while she was painting, and I really liked it. They very colorful, but at the same time good sense of a temperature to it, and sort of like Julius Painting, just placement and the placement location of the gate, right, comes straight out to us, and strong contrast between dark part. Let me show you here. Okay, dark and back, the side of the wall against the blue sky. So it's no doubt, what she was attracted to, no doubt about it. And if I remember correctly, Mary, when she was painting that the long circle on the far tree, that was the tree, bottom of the tree line was actually touching the top of the wall. So I made the suggestion, so maybe we can sneak in some water that way, that the foliage doesn't look like it's sprouting out of the top of the wall. So earlier we saw, I think it was Julius Painting. Yeah, she had a similar situation. I know that location quite well. That kind of change the direction so that exposes more of the water there. So having that worked out very nicely there, gives a sense that there's a more distance that going far, and then that's turning the corner around there. Okay. And this is what I was talking earlier with the Julius Painting as well. At the bottom of that the long beam, horizontal beam, perhaps we can add some, I think you have some there, some warmer temperature color underneath of it to indicate the light bouncing off from the ground and throwing back some reflected light that will give more luminous appearance to it. And she didn't use a lot of yellow into it, but still it gives a good sense of a warm temperature, probably because of all that cool temperature, the brick behind, a lot of blue grays and so on. Sort of like what I noticed from Linda's painting, by strategically indicating or placing cooler temperatures, you don't necessarily have to overload with the yellows and oranges to make it warm, but you can very effectively make it look warm without necessarily making it warm there. A few other things here is that the cast shadows, that the lower right circle there, as cast shadow is shadow is casting away from origin of the shadow, it should be a little more diffuse in the edges, and also the strength of the value itself is going to losing a little bit. So as it comes down to the lower edge of the canvas, I would soften the edges, especially the I can point it here, one of the three, actually two top ones and so on, soften the edges, and also make the value slightly lighter than value where cast shadow begins, which is bottom of the tree. That's not actually seen in the painting, within the painting there. Another thing here is that this long the blue rectangle I indicated there, kind of a similar suggestion I made to Liz's painting of the fountain. At the bottom, the grass, I said, if you make it too continuous line, you can look more carpet-like appearance to it. Now, she painted relatively thinner than how Liz painted, so I don't see this looking like carpet appearance to it. but perhaps again, all you need is give a little tap. If you have enough paint applied already, then just go back with a dry brush, give some upward vertical tap with a soft hair brush. Even the bristle brush will do to break up such a continuous line, even if it's not looking that way, but just to make it more natural, the grass sprouting out of the ground. That works very nicely there. Let's see. Yeah, that's what I noticed there. Yeah. So Mary, is this the length of the shadow you see? Because I know you came a little earlier when the sun was lower. Did you indicate those shadows in the beginning when the sun was lower than when I did demo, and then?
That's right. I started beforehand.
Yeah. So I noticed that when I see that's such a long shadow, that kind of long shadow happens very early in the morning or sun toward dusk, when sun was either very low in the west or east and so on. So by looking at the length of the shadow, this painting gives a sense, okay, what time period of the day it might have painted. If it was like noonday, obviously, then you're gonna have very small shadow right under the object. So that in itself already communicates the time of the day. That's the kind of a thing that plein air painting is so nice about. It's almost like you are communicating when you are, what season you are, what time of the day you are, and so on. At least something that I like. So that, and Deborah.
Thank you.
Now, sure. It's from Botanic Garden. Birch is there. Birch is quite interesting and tough paint, the trees to paint. So here is her image there. So I'm assuming she might have been really attracted by good contrast, strong contrast between lighter value of the birch against the dark value of the window inside the building window there. So it's a quite tough topic because you've got so many things going on there. So a few things I noticed here. I really like the design itself of the horizon so it's also much about the geometry I'm seeing that I really like it. Repeating rhythmic, the lines of the verticals and the diagonals with the background, the horizontal appearance of it, that I really like the setup there. Also, I really like the color, the cleanness of color. Watercolor can be easily muddy if you fuss around too much, but I don't see that kind of muddiness to it. So it worked out very nicely in maintaining a clean color scheme there. What I also noticed is certainly you indicated the building with a warm orange color, but even the greens, like the grass in at the bottom or leaf in the tree, I was thinking maybe you can find ways to sneak in some not so green colors, as long as you can match the values. For instance, the deep dark at the bottom of it, toward the bottom of the trees and so on. If you match the values and create, let's say, same dark value of the purples and blues and even like oranges and so on, it'll fit nicely there, but without being same green and same the value to it. So that's something I noticed, that sort of like what Howard was saying in his painting, the about 2,000 shades of green he mentioned there. So you can kind of alleviate too many repeating greens in the trees as long as you match the values, and then after that you control the intensity, the grayness, the saturation, and so on. Then you're free to sneak in all those colors without overloading it. So that's even the trees. I was looking at the circles above and below. What I'm trying to indicate here is when I look at the bottom circle and top circle, and what I like to do is, especially very long trees, I look up and down to see if there is the variation, whether temperature, value, or intensity. That way, I mean, it's got to be there has to be some variation where the bottom of the tree is receiving the light bouncing around from different object versus the top portion of the trees, they may receive the light differently. So I search out where there's any place that I can sneak in. Now, of course, there's always danger of overthinking and overinterpreting there, and you start breaking up the values. So that's the key. Just like what I just said minutes ago. As long as you maintain the values, then I'd like to search out perhaps temperature changes between bottom of the tree versus the top of the tree and so on. Those are things that I would look for there. And I also wrote down. And also, we can clearly see she went for those sky holes in the top. So they are the big main sky holes. But I was thinking maybe there can be not many, but few little smaller baby sky holes without doing too many of it. Certainly you don't want to indicate every single those smaller sky holes, but while you have larger ones, very limited number of it, just enough to make its presence without scattering too much. Few of them. If you already painted watercolor, perhaps you can dab out the color with the wet brush and so on. So that's another thing that I noticed that might have enhanced it further. But again, I really like the all the geometry of the verticals, diagonals, and it just happens to be there's a long window there, so it works very nicely in geometry there. Okay. Now here's the Kroon's painting here. So he was painting right up where I was painting. So the way he saw the light was, I'm sure, a little different. And this is the part that the lower left corner, well, you can see it here, lower left corner of the sky is different from upper right corner. Because that lower left corner is more south as well as east. That was, as sun is coming up, that the area of the sky color was a little different, slightly more warmer, a little more slightly hazy. As opposed to upper right corner, we saw much more intense blue, as he indicated there. So I think he really caught on that, and then it worked out very nicely. I'm sure one could have just gone along with just flat blue there, but having that now, just like what I said about the Mary's painting, it gives a sense of, okay, that must be a certain day. Not only that, that must be the certain direction, some part of this painting must be south or east and whatnot and so on. As small as it may seem, I don't know, I'm really curious about those things there. So they worked out very nicely. In this case, sort of like Mars's painting, the Dorothy's painting. I said I like the geometry of the building, different shapes and so on. Similar thing here. Unlike what I painted, I was more focused on front of the ivy covered part, but now he has more geometry of a horizontal roof, longer and smaller, the arches. Again, in my painting, arch was just enough to indicate the dark, but now it's got much more interesting the play of the different geometry there. So I really like seeing that verticality of the chimney, and then the triangle, long horizontal rectangle, small horizontal rectangle, and arches and so on. So I really like the combination of all the play of the geometry there. And that I can see he was hinting at it, but if I were to do it, having seen that scene, the similar time he was looking at, I might have, I would push little warm with a more yellow and perhaps even lighter value on the circled area there. He certainly indicated that, but I think he could have used a little stronger, considering again the type of day, such an intense sunny day and so on. Now the triangular, the shadow, I really like it. That's such a cool temperature, the shadow, that enhances the sense of a warm temperature right above on the roof, because the roof was receiving light, especially when toward the later on when he was finishing it. Now sun is going up higher and higher up, so now roof is starting to receive the light much more direct angle. So then the temperature of the roof was even the warmer than when I first started, like the day before at 8 o'clock or that day at 9 o'clock there. So the placing that quite the gray and cool temperature of the shadow that really helps the warm temperature right above that to indicate the type of day it was there. For that, I think to match with those temperatures, those some of the temperatures in the steps, the stairs, and the ground, perhaps they could have also received a little warmer temperature. Certainly having also very blue, gray, dark within the stairs, that certainly helps to bring up the temperature and the light part of it. But when I'm looking at warmer temperature he created on the rooftop and the ivy part, I think unless they are in the shadow, the stairs seems to be a little cooler in calibrating the shadow matching the matching the light he indicated in the rooftop and so on there. And I the front, the circle that they're going kind of upward angle. I think it just happens to be quite such an edge there, so it's a little difficult to indicate the going up appearance of it. So it's a tough situation how it was cropped there. So I don't know, maybe give it more angle to it, something like that, because certainly I know that's going up, just like you can see the stairs going up, there's gentle incline, slight hilly appearance to it. So that's a quite tough situation to indicate that appearance to it. But certainly it carries that appearance that works along with the stairs going up. It just, if it was a little larger, then perhaps you could run it more diagonal angle to it. It's just a difficult situation there. Okay. But again, I really like the sense of geometry, combined geometry playing against each other, and then warmth of the rooftop. The light has changed now. Rooftop becomes much warmer temperature there, and I think he caught that very well, considering that was the time period that he painted the area there. Okay. And this is Simon's painting, watercolor, which is always tough material to do it. A few things here. It's a huge, large geometric shapes there, vertical, horizontal, triangle, arches, and so on. So very convincing presence there. There's no small breakup there, just the larger shapes there that always carries the composition very boldly. On the other hand, perhaps the light receiving area, especially at the top, I forgot whose painting earlier on shows a very strong light on the top. So he has a very similar appearance where the top portion of the tower is really receiving the light. At least that's the sense that I'm getting it here. In that case, perhaps just a little additional, not so much of detail, but more definition or description of the tower itself. Very limited way, because you don't want to over describe it. I was wondering whether that might have enhanced it even further without breaking up the large design of those verticals and horizontals and so on there. Now I really like those kind of blotch appearance that you get from the watercolor right here, 2 circles here. That gives kind of a suggestive appearance of the irregular appearance of the ivy, lights and darks, and so on, without actually painting in light against dark, light against dark, just a sense of a little spotty or speckled appearance to it, just gives just enough of a suggestive appearance to it, and without actually doing individual details and so on. So I think that worked out very nicely. That's one of the many things that so nice things about the watercolor there. What else I wrote down here? Oh, the color-wise, clearly we are not going after matching the color per color, but this being quite warm day, maybe we can control the color slightly more orangish or slightly warmer color still. Again, this is a case that I'm looking at the screen. So in his real piece, maybe the color was much more warmer, orangish brick color, and then maybe I'm seeing more downgraded temperature of the color. That might be the case. But from what I'm looking at, it seems to be a more cooler reddish color as opposed to kind of brick color that also was receiving very strong sunlight with a much more warmer orange appearance to it. But that's just based upon the image that I'm looking at from the screen there. Okay. But again, it's almost like this building just has landed on the ground. So there's just a good sense of a presence came down on the ground plane. Very strong presence there. This is Barbara's painting. Now, this is a kind of the view that I was painting. Was it 2 Fridays ago, Barbara? I was
I think
painting.
so. Yes, I think so.
Yeah. And then she sneaked up on behind me. No, she didn't. She just happened to be walking by. She startled me there. So that was my first scouting. And that was the view that I thought maybe I would do demo until I decided, well, there are so many perspective lines and so on. It's like that can be a little challenging for anyone who's not used to, say, building structures and the perspective. Not only that, just having so much detail in the tower, it can easily distract us. And then we start losing what is more important, which is largeness of the composition. For that, she did a good job of not drawing into those smaller details, just enough of those things absolutely necessary there. So she did a good work of not being distracted by it. Certainly the very, very warm sense of very orangish, very warm light. Again, that's what we felt that day. It might be a little overly, slightly more than warmer than what might be, but since there's such a warmer day, I would rather take slightly warmer temperature appearance like she has than not catching it there. So I think that worked out very nicely there. Now, same thing here. It's one thing that you got nice warm temperature, but also you can also enhance that further if you give a little cool temperature on, I didn't mark it here, on the triangular, the shadow part of it. So you got nice dark to set apart good sense of form. The values set out the form, create a sense of form. But if you like to give the dark values, that is, but if you like to give a sensible the warmth in the lit area, then perhaps you could give a little more color, the temperature-oriented color on the shadow side. Again, okay. As it is, it already gives a good sense of the form and the light against the shadow. But if you wish to give a little more sense of a temperature, then since you already have very warm temperature on the light side, yeah, perhaps you could push a little cooler temperature on the shadow side as well. Okay. Perspective looks quite convincing. That's good. Now she doesn't have any unnecessarily hard edges, but just enough to give some sense of a convincing sense of a solid structure, like the front roof top and so on. So without necessarily making edges very sharp, which we can easily do that by mistake, of course, whenever we deal with the building structures and so on. But without doing that, she just give enough of a firmness to the edges of the building to give it some sense of a solidity without making too hard appearance to it. I like this, the going up. I talked about it earlier before too, but the sense of an inclining plane going up. So having that works out very nicely, very tactile feel, as if I can kind of walk on the step, the inclining heel of it. And also clearly that also works as a compositional device to lead the viewer's eye, follow this road to my building there. So very simple device, but very effective device. And she didn't miss that one. So it worked out very nicely there. This the two circles, looks like somebody's glasses. But I wasn't quite sure what it was because kind of the tangent continuity created by edge ending of the tree combined with picked up by the shadow shade. So indeed, it might have looked that way. If that's the case, then perhaps you can soften it, maybe give some irregular ins and outs. That way, those that I indicated there, they don't carry continuously between solid object of the tree into sensible air that the shadow should create. So that's something that kind of looked at little odd to me. But still, again, a good perspective. Most of all, very warm, light temperature, and good compositional device. So it worked out very nicely.
Okay.
Also, because such a blue, the sky there, that makes the orange warm temperature even stand out even stronger.
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
And
yeah,
this,
Thank you.
you're welcome. This is Lori's painting. I saw she was painting it that day. There, she was behind me there. So it's the tough topic because I know because when I got there a little earlier than others, the light was quite different than when she was finishing it up. So it changed it up quite a bit, and she was kind of debating whether she should go with a softer contrast or stronger contrast earlier on and so on. So I think it's kind of a in between, but just enough to give its contrast between one side of the wall against the other. Again, because of that, it gives enough of a sense of a structure and sense of a solidity that is landed on the building there. So that is very gives a very convincing presence, especially the dark underneath that really anchors the building onto the ground. So it worked out very nicely there. And just enough of a sense of a structure because those of you remember that building, it's got a lot of Gothic buildings there. I think that's Gothic building, a lot of details, decorations, and so on. So it is very challenging and even overwhelming, and then it can be really distracting there. So she went along with the main columns and main parts of it just enough to give a sense of a type of building that it was there. So that worked out nicely. Now, a few other things here is a kind of a similar theme I talked earlier about the outdoor painting. On one hand, those darks are very important. That really anchors the building on the ground. At the same time, in outdoor painting, you don't want to make push the value so deep dark in larger size. Smaller places, absolutely necessary, but if it gets too large, then it gets kind of lose the sense of a light that's permeating around surrounding areas there. So some places you can keep it not as dark, especially those darks in the window area. Perhaps you can add some lighter value of the blues, whatnot, to suggest some reflection from the skies and so on. Particularly because of those long columns are such a light value against the dark. On one hand, it really gives a strong projecting appearance, but at the same time, it can make the dark even darker appearance to it. So that's the thing that I would think maybe some places that you can soften the darkness a little bit. So this kind of a dark and light arrangement is very good for more like the beginning thumbnails and so on, and you can still carry on. But once you get to too large, now, of course, there's always danger of breaking down the larger darks to so many trivial, smaller lights, light spots there, and then it starts losing cohesive flow of the dark. So there is a danger to it. On the other hand, of course, if you make it the dark in too large areas, that can give a sense that the light devoid of light appearance to it when you're painting outdoors there. So that's something that you have to calibrate. Again, this is where if you have those main 9 value scale that the students do, you can actually put it next to your painting, and then you can check, okay, is my values extremely dark and light separated, or am I utilizing some in between values and so on. Of course, that doesn't do anything about the temperature, but then temperature you can also think about at the lower part towards the ground and so on. That way, dark doesn't carry so long, so wide continuously there. Okay, so that's something I noticed there. But still, it gives a good sense of presence, and it's a tough topic. It's a big church, big building with a lot of decoration. So to me, it takes quite a courage to tackle that. So she handled it very nicely. I like those lights and the speckled lights in the beam at the bottom of it, almost like light filters through it. And then also by doing so, that clearly defines the ground plane without actually, describing clearly there. Just having the spots of light indicates, okay, where the building ends or begins from the ground and appearance of it. So I really like that light too. Yeah, so these are the darks I was talking about earlier there. Now, this is a Mark's painting here. Again, the architectural topic, it's quite challenging there. And also, as far as perspective-wise, arches are quite difficult. The angle changes and so on. So it's quite a tough, challenging view because he had to deal with all those arches in perspective, not facing straight on, which is a little easier, but now I have to deal with that. So to begin with, before we get into the colors and so on, just basic perspective-wise, these lines, the line I indicated, it should come down towards your eye level. So at least the top line of the roof and bottom line of the roof, they should not diverge, but they should have more converging tendency towards your eye level there. And so the far building, another arrow I indicated there, the angle seems to be a little too steep. It can easily look like kind of a disfigured appearance of what. Okay? So that's the drawing part of it, perspective part of it. And maybe I'm saying same thing again here, but some of these darks are a little, again, it might be because of I'm looking at the screen image there, seems to be too harshly dark and kind of too similar dark there. So I'm looking at the darks within the arch. I'm also looking at the dark in the foreground, at the top of the building there. That seems to be a little too same. When the darks within the arch, that building, there's a lot of reflective light bouncing around in there. So actually that area, while having to be careful not to break down too much, but at the same time, just be careful not to carry the same dark in same manner there. That's something you have to be careful there. The warmth of the temperature, of the building on the top, also rooftop, that worked out nicely. Again, combined with the blue sky, it clearly shows, the must be a very warm, sunny day appearance to it. So that's very good. Let's see. They sort of like what I said about the Simon's painting. It's just my choice that without doing a lot of unnecessary details, but I may choose very selective areas where I find it most interesting area, and then add a little more of a description, a definition. I try to avoid the term detail, because when I say detail, and then in the younger students, they start using very small brushes and so on. So I prefer term more of a definition than detail, or between definition and detail, I can use maybe description, but very select areas because the type of decoration it has, but of course you don't want to overdo it there. So those are things that I noticed there. And when I see quite warm temperature on the rooftop there, then the green in the front, I can see clearly darker green that you indicated the shadow, which means the green that is not dark, that must be the light. If that's the case, then I would spike up the intensity a little higher than if it is that I'm looking at right now. This is a Robin's painting, last painting. So yeah, the kind of a similar attraction I had, like what I saw in the Julius painting and Linda's painting, very soft light quality to it. A lot of soft edges, but just enough to show even though it's treated very softly, but still enough of a sense of a structure. That is not easy, and then I think she carried it very nicely. Because if you make it too soft, too many places, it can be a little too puffy appearance to it. If you go the opposite direction, and because it's made out of the stones and so on, you go with the very hard edges, then obviously it can be too cut out, two-dimensional appearance to it. So striking a balance so that she carries the attraction of soft quality without losing sense of structure. I think she struck the balance just right there. That's why I wrote down here, soft edges, especially all that the greens in the backside that worked out nicely to indicate they are farther away compared to the greens in the front. And this is what I indicated there. Oh, that's that worked out nicely there. And what I said earlier, I forgot whose painting was, but these the purples that you see within the bricks and so on. I circled it with the blue there. Now again, they worked out very nicely as a color sense and temperature sense. So it's clearly, I don't know whether indeed there was some purple or blue bricks or not, but whether that's the case or not, it worked out just enough to give some cooler temperature to it while using non-local colors instead of just a darker orange, darker brick color, but indicating that. Because from what I remember, that brick has, that gate has some different colors, but in this case, color also indicates the temperature as well. It's nicely. The line I indicated was that that gives another sense of ground and depth to it, and carrying on behind those two columns there, so that continuously shows, and that creates the whatever the horizon, the plane behind, and right above that you see dark values. So she effectively created that flat plane that meets the vertical plane by the tree. So as thin as that it is, I find it very attractive to see that, just creating another depth and the horizontal plane there. So I really like that part too. Now, as I said, it's got very soft quality to it. Now, the one side that the other side you have to be careful about, that is kind of a day we had was being quite warm day. On the light side, on the other hand, perhaps you could have spiked up some temperature, like some of those orangish colors or a little warm colors there. So on one hand, I really like the softness of the cooler the palette appearance to it. On the other hand, when I think about that particular day being quite warm day, you don't want to lose that type of weather or temperature we felt that day. Same with the sky. I see. I mean, I really like the coloration of these purples and so on, but then they can bring down the temperature as if it was more overcast day or cool day and so on. So again, that's the kind of the balance between what we felt that particular day in the sun versus what you like with your color temperature and so on. So that's something that the decision that you have to make to balance things out there. But yeah, it's a 9x12 size, but I really like it. All the temperatures and the ground planes and so on there. Nothing was really harshly described or detailed, but just enough the sense of what is going on back there. And that's the last painting, but I also added my painting. So that was the painting I did in the demo. Was 11x14, and that was I guess somebody else painted that day, but the week before, the day before. So this is 8x10. You can see compared to this is more like the color study. So you can see it doesn't have as much details. I did indicate that the two elongated window next to it. I missed out, and that the hole on the roof in my study doesn't matter. That was not my goal there. So if I wanted to develop larger painting like 16x20 and so on, that serves me as my study. In this case, it was 11x14. So I went a little further to describe even that step going up the lower left corner. That was very suggestive in here, just gentle sense of upward incline, but here I actually indicated more like step-like appearance to it. So there's that. And this is a painting that when 2 weeks before last Sunday, yeah, when I for the first in my first attempt to scout out my demo place there. So that's why I settled down and Barbara happens to be walking behind me there, taking a walk there. So this is when I said, well, maybe there's so many things that can be more distracting. That's when I changed my mind to do the demo on the other side of that. So that is all. Any questions that I can answer you, or am I done, Mary? Or
I don't know where Mary is, but where'd Mary go?
okay.
But
So
great
wherever-
critique,
Yes,
So I
it
hope
is.
that's helpful.
It is.
very
Don.
helpful.
Everybody. It was very useful. Yes.
I don't know if you saw any of the chats, but everybody's just like raving about their critiques, Don. So
Thank you very much.
Well,
Yes.
thank you everyone for kind words.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Critique.
My pleasure. It's a nice painting together with you, and hopefully I'll do that more often.
Yes,
Thank you.
absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, guys.
you.
Bye bye.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.